Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. So just a few days after we got the news that Michael Whatley, the Republican National Committee chairman, announced he was running in the North Carolina Senate race, and even a few more days after former Democratic Governor Roy Cooper announced he was running in the North Carolina Senate race, we have our first poll out of the state featuring Whatley versus Cooper. Now there are some rumors that there's another poll in the works from Emerson. As of the time I'm recording this video, which is on July 31st, that poll has not yet come out, so if that does come out, I'll be doing another video about that in the coming days. But this first poll that has come out, in an article by Newsweek, it goes over the matchup between Roy Cooper, the former Democratic governor, and Michael Whatley. Now, this poll, which was conducted by Victory Insights, gives the first real look at what a head-to-head matchup could be between Cooper and Whatley, in this race being vacated by Senator Republican Tom Tillis, who is not running for re-election, obviously, in this race. Now, according to the article, it says that North Carolina is viewed as one of the Democrats' best pickup opportunities, and to flip a seat, they believe Trump's approval rating could fuel a 2018-style blue wave. Cooper is viewed as a strong candidate, but they still have not won a Senate race in the state of North Carolina since 2008, despite it being consistently a very competitive state. Now, the poll found that Cooper and Whatley are in for a tough race from the Victory Insights poll. The first part of the poll gave Cooper a narrow advantage with 43.4% of respondents. Now, for Michael Whatley, Whatley had about 40.2%, so roughly about a 3-point lead for Cooper over Whatley starting out. Now, the poll did actually ask undecideds, were pushed to say who they were leaning towards, Cooper or Whatley. The margins narrowed here. In that scenario, Cooper got 44.4% of respondents, while Whatley's numbers went up to 43.5%. And that poll was conducted among 600 likely voters between July 28th and July 30th. So in that one, Cooper still led in that race, but that was down to about 1%. And this is very interesting. There's a few things to be taken away from this poll. For one thing, you should say at this point in the race, Cooper probably should be having a lot more of a larger lead. Now, Victory Insights is not a poll or a pollster I'm super familiar with, so I don't think it's going to be like an end-all, be-all. This is going to be the sacred poll that gets it 100% right come 2026. But this race does show that Roy Cooper should be starting out with a little bit of an advantage, given he was the former governor of the state. He has much higher name recognition than Michael Whatley, and seeing as he left the governor's office with high approval ratings, he should be having a pretty decent lead and a good floor against Michael Whatley. However, this poll shows there's a lot of undecided vote, and I think that actually hurts Roy Cooper more than Michael Whatley. Michael Whatley's entering this race, even though he was the chairman of the Republican National Committee, and he has the endorsement of President Trump and a few U.S. senators now. His name recognition is not going to be very high among a lot of everyday North Carolinians, whereas Roy Cooper, as the former governor, likely will be. So Roy Cooper, as I went over a few videos ago, has a long track record in North Carolina at winning very competitive elections and being a real electoral juggernaut for the Democrats in the state. So I'm not going to overreact to this one poll and say because it's very close, Roy Cooper's automatically going to lose, because I don't think that is the case. There's a lot of undecided vote, and for the Democrats, you'd probably hope Roy Cooper's floor of support would be more around 47, 48%, because that's likely what he's going to need to start out at to really win this race. As North Carolina at the Senate and presidential level, despite being a toss-up state, trends more towards the Republican side. But Roy Cooper in the first part of the poll does start with a 3-point lead, and I'm not going to take that away from Cooper at 43-40 with 16% undecided. With leaners ending up being 44-44, confirms what I've been saying the last few days, which is this is going to be a very, very close race, and now I believe the closest Senate race in the 2026 elections. You're going to have Michael Whatley with all the backing of the RNC, of President Trump, of National Senate Republicans, in a state that has leaned Republican at the federal level for president and Senate, going up against probably the most popular Democrat in the state of North Carolina, the former governor of the state, who, as I mentioned, governor elections are very different than Senate and president. They don't always carry over to success, especially when the party in the state is the minority party, like in Montana with, I believe it was Steve Bullock, the Democrat, in 2018, Phil Bredesen, the Democratic governor. But it can happen when the state is very close in elections, like Rick Scott in the state of Florida in 2018. And I would argue this Senate race would more closely resemble the 2018 Florida Senate race than it would the 2020 Montana Senate race. Albeit to say, the point I'm trying to make here is Republicans should not think that Roy Cooper is going to lose this Senate race because of this one poll. Because Roy Cooper, I still think right now, based on this very, very early ranking, at very least, Roy Cooper is tied in this race. Now, my most recent prediction, a little bit of a spoiler here, I did very narrowly give it to Michael Whatley as of today's margins, but I gave it to Whatley by by around half a percentage point, 0.5% over Roy Cooper. And I do think that's because as the election gets closer and this race becomes more nationalized, some of Roy Cooper's shine as his time as governor is going to wear off a little bit as the campaign season heats up. That usually happens for governors running for Senate in these races. The question will it be enough for the Republicans to actually win? But this poll at least shows that Roy Cooper is starting out with a little bit of a lead around initial asking for Whatley versus Cooper, because a 3-point lead for Cooper is a pretty good start. It's just you would wish Cooper would be more at 47% than at 43%. But Whatley starting out in the low 40s before leaners being included really does not surprise me. Now, for how this ends up going for 2026, again, I've been mentioning this a lot. 2024, President Trump won the state of North Carolina by 3.2%. 2020, President Trump only won by 1.3% against Joe Biden. And in 2016, however, Trump won the state by 3.7%. Last time it went Democratic at the presidential level was in 2008 when Barack Obama defeated John McCain by 0.33%. Now, it's possible that I and many pollsters covering this race are completely wrong and that Roy Cooper ends up blowing Michael Whatley out of the water and wins this race like his governor's races. But I don't really think that's going to happen. I think if Roy Cooper is going to win, it's going to resemble something like 2008, where Roy Cooper very narrowly wins this race, and the Republican Michael Whatley still probably gets around 48.5% to 49%. Now, we did see in the Senate race involving Thom Tillis back in 2020, Tillis only got 48.7% of the vote. And I've been saying for a few months now, if Thom Tillis, who at the time was looking like he was going to run, if he only gets 48.7% of the vote against Roy Cooper, he's going to lose this race. And that remains true for Michael Whatley. And it's actually what cost a lot of Republicans some Senate races in 2024, where in the early polling, I was pointing out in states like Wisconsin, like Michigan, like Nevada, like Arizona, the Republicans were not polling as strongly in those states, even as President Trump was at the top of the ticket. For instance, Eric Hovde, the Republican, ended up getting 48.5%, a very strong competitive number. But at the top of the ticket, President Trump got 49.6%. He underperformed President Trump. Michigan, President Trump got 49.7%. Mike Rogers only got 48.3%. Now, Pennsylvania had very narrowly worked out, where McCormick got 48.8%, President Trump got 50.3%. That one barely worked out. Without third-party vote, it likely probably would not have worked out that way. It was so close. Nevada, President Trump won the state, getting 50.6% of the vote. At the Senate level, Sam Brown only got 46.22%. And lastly, in Arizona, Kari Lake only got 47.65%. President Trump got 52.2%. The point I'm making here is for some reason in 2024, and even in 2020 and 2016, when President Trump is at the top of the ticket, a lot of MAGA Republicans come out to vote in large numbers for the president. When President Trump is not at the top of the ticket, things don't usually seem to go as well in a lot of these competitive states. Now, the one big good thing I can say was in 2022, for the Republicans, Ted Budd did win by 3.2% against the Democrat Cheri Beasley. And Budd getting 50.5% is very good. However, and Ted Budd also had the endorsement of President Trump and Laura Trump as U.S. Representative from North Carolina. But no disrespect to Cheri Beasley, Roy Cooper is going to get a higher number and floor of support than Cheri Beasley did in 2022. Roy Cooper is essentially a unicorn, a very strong Democratic candidate that Republicans are going to have a very tough time defeating. So the Republicans need to try and get Ted Budd's percentage at 50.5%, because if Michael Whatley can only get the 48.7% that Tillis got, it likely was not going to be a large enough number to win that race. Now, in 2020, there was a large number of third-party vote in the Tillis-Cal Cunningham race. Tillis got 48.7%, Cunningham only got 46.9%. Third-party candidate Bray got 3.1, and Hayes, the independent or third-party candidate, got 1.2. For Whatley versus Cooper, we're likely not going to see this much third-party vote. And if we do, it's really interesting to see how that third-party vote is going to split out, but I would bet we see higher numbers among Democrats and Republicans. The Senate race back in 2016, the Republican Burr won by 5.7, but in 2014, Tom Tillis got 48.8, Kay Hagan 47.26, third-party candidate Huff got 3.74. The Republicans have won for Tom Tillis' two races, getting 48.8% and essentially getting lucky with the Democrats getting a low percentage and third-party candidate getting a considerable amount. That's not going to work with Roy Cooper, who in his governor's races, the lowest Roy Cooper got was when he defeated Republican Governor Pat McCrory, where Cooper got 49% of the vote. In 2020, Roy Cooper got 51.52% of the vote. And my current early forecasts, I've been doing some of the numbers out and seeing how I would predict this race right now. I actually do have Roy Cooper essentially getting around 49% of the vote after everything is said and done at this point in time. So right now, the question is, can Michael Whatley break that 49% and get over that 50% threshold while at the same time keeping third-party vote to a minimum? Because if there's third-party vote getting around 2 to 3%, you're likely going to see a large enough number for Roy Cooper to narrowly win this race, like he did against Pat McCrory in 2016. And what happened in this race? Cooper got 49%, the Republican McCrory only got 48.8%. The Republicans seem to have a slight problem in North Carolina of getting that 48.5%, 48.8%. And the third-party candidates essentially play spoiler and keep the Republicans from getting that extra support to win. Michael Whatley is going to have to fix that problem for the Republicans in 2026 to have a chance at winning this race. Now, in 2020, it was different. Roy Cooper won this race outright. He got 51.5% of the vote. The Republican force only got 47%. If Cooper is able to do something like this, where he's breaking 50% of the vote, there's no chance the Republican's going to win. Cooper's winning this race outright. But I think based on how competitive this race is going to be, and at the Senate and presidential precedent, I think it's more likely than not we see a Senate race where Roy Cooper is getting in between 48.5 and 49% of the vote, and then the onus is going to be on Michael Whatley trying to break that 49% threshold and narrowly eke out a close victory. And that's where things I think stand on North Carolina right now and how all that could go. Just to give you an idea, this is what the 2024 map looked like in North Carolina. Obviously a lot of red, a lot of blue. We see some very close results here in Nash, which is a 1.8% win for Trump, Wilson 0.4% for Harris. These areas aren't that large in population, but they're very close margins of victory. Let's go back to 2008 when Obama won the state. Now, obviously, a lot has changed over the last, what is that, going to be 18 years or so, but Richmond was a lean blue county. Franklin was barely red. Nash was 1.3% red. Martin was blue very narrowly. These are key areas to watch for. And you can even look at Roy Cooper's numbers in his own governor's races as well and compare this, which I'm sure in future videos I'll be doing more so in depth. But these areas like New Hanover, which barely voted for Kamala Harris in 2024, in the Senate race, what's Roy Cooper's margins in this area going to be? Is it an under 1 point win, or is it like a 3 or 4 point win? Is it a 5 point win? These are going to be important things to watch for in this very close race where, yes, we're going to see Michael Whatley run up the votes in the rural areas. We're going to see Roy Cooper run up the numbers in Mecklenburg County and in Wake County and Guilford County, and where the large population centers are. But in a Senate race like this, with a very close matchup with two marquee candidates with a lot of backing of the national parties, this race is going to be won and decided in the suburbs, in the very close 50-50 areas like Nash, like Wilson, like New Hanover, like Pasquotank. These areas that are very close are going to decide this election. So looking at the map that Cooper did in 2020, for instance, and President Trump in 2024, we have to look at these numbers and see how they're going on election night, because that's going to be the telltale sign if Michael Whatley is able to narrowly defend this race, or if Roy Cooper is poised to give the Democrats the first win at the Senate level since 2008. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to hit like and subscribe if you did. Leave a comment below. Tell me all your thoughts, questions, or comments about this race, and I hope to see you in a future video. Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today we have some news out of the state of Kansas where Attorney General Chris Kobach has officially announced that he is running for re-election and will not be running for governor in 2026. Now Chris Kobach, this name may be familiar to you as he was the Republican nominee for governor in the state of Kansas back in 2018. And you could argue in large part he's the reason that the Democrats were able to elect Governor Laura Kelly in 2018. Kobach only got 42.98% of the vote to Kelly's 48% of the vote, with independent Greg Orman getting a considerable 6.5% and third-party candidate Caldwell getting 1.9%. So Chris Kobach put up a very poor showing in Kansas in 2018 to win this governor's race. Now, in 2022, Chris Kobach was also on the ballot, not for governor this time around, but Laura Kelly won re-election by 2.2% against the Republican Schmidt. But we can also look for the Kansas elections as well in 2022 as I look to pull these up here, as we can see the Attorney General election for the state of Kansas. Let me find here. Now, in this election, Chris Kobach did defeat Democrat Chris Mann, but look at these numbers. Chris Kobach won with 50.8% of the vote to the Democrat Chris Mann's 49.2%. This was a really close race. Kobach got about 506,817 votes. Mann got 490,925 votes. So roughly 16,000 votes separating Kobach and Mann in this very close race. So again, Chris Kobach in these two races have either been in a very, very close race or he lost to Democrat Laura Kelly back in 2018. So Kobach, and I'm not going to get into the very specifics because I also have not done a super amount of research about him, but there seems to be a stigma around Kobach of being a weak general election candidate for the Republicans. Now, the 2026 governor election in Kansas is an open race as Laura Kelly is term limited and cannot seek a third term. And the Republicans are hoping to flip the state, which is a pretty reliable Republican state at the presidential and Senate level, back to their side and away from the Democrats. Now, the Democrats, the Lieutenant Governor David Tolan has already announced he's not running, but two Democrats are State Senators Ethan Corson and Cindy Hochler, State Senator, with Minority Leader of the Kansas Senate, Dina Sykes, are potentially running as well. The Democrats are going to be in for a tough time, though, at winning this seat, but the Republicans could potentially still mess up on their part if they put up a bad candidate, which opens the door for the Democrats and maybe third-party candidates getting a good showing here. But without Chris Kobach running, the Republicans seem to avoid the worst situation in that. Now, the Republican race is completely wide open in the Republican primary. Jeff Collier, the former governor from 2018 to 2019, is running, as well as Doug Billings and Joy Eakins. Ty Masterson, the president of the Kansas Senate. Charlotte O'Hara is running. Stacey Rogers, Vicki Schmidt, the Kansas Insurance Commissioner, and Scott Schwab, the Secretary of State for Kansas, are all running in this race. Right now, the current predictions from Cook Political Report and Sabado Crystal Ball have this race as a lean Republican as a flip for the GOP. Inside Elections has it as a battleground. And in my own personal governor rankings, I recently gave the race to the Republicans in the likely category around a 5-point victory. However, Chris Kobach, being the Republican nominee, certainly could have put a very big wrench in this, as I would argue there's no person in the state of Kansas that gets more Democrats out to vote than Chris Kobach. Him being the Republican nominee really would have hurt the GOP's chances. Without Kobach running, though, it looks like the Republicans could be poised to flip this governor's seat from Kansas in 2026 after a very close win for Kelly in 2022, who she holds very high approval ratings in the state of Kansas. Now, it is possible after the 8 years of Laura Kelly as governor of Kansas, voters in Kansas like the job she's been doing, so maybe they'll be more willing to vote for a Democrat for governor than maybe other Republican states like Nebraska or Oklahoma. But I think we see the Republicans likely win this state, but Chris Kobach running for Attorney General, not only does it probably give the Republicans a better chance at winning the Kansas race, but it also shifts attention a little bit to the Attorney General race for 2026, where Chris Kobach winning re-election, given his past, is not 100% a guarantee to happen as well. So his Attorney General race will be very close, but Republicans do have a stronger chance now at winning the governor's race in a very crucial state in 2026 as the GOP seeks to flip this seat from blue to red. So I thought this was some pretty important election news, and I wanted to give you a little update on this as we talk about the state of Kansas. Because you look at the map in 2022, only a handful of counties are going for Laura Kelly on this map from the 2022 race, which was about a 2-point win. But when you look at the map compared to the 2024 presidential race for President Trump, where Trump won by 16 points, there's only about 5 counties here that go blue. And Riley was very close. Shawnee County was very close. Only Douglas, Johnson, and Winnedot ended up going by more than 5 points for the Democrats. Whereas in the 2022 governor map, much different story, a lot smaller margins in the red areas, and a lot more blue. But I thought this was interesting. Make sure to leave a comment below, tell me your thoughts and what you think of all this. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in a future video. So, based on that, the current results would essentially be the Democrats at 227 House seats. Republicans would be at 208, based on the current generic ballot numbers for the Real Clear Politics polling average for 2026. Now, it's important to note, obviously, we're in August of 2026. We don't know what the generic ballot's going to be looking like come November 2026, if the polls are even correct, if everything translates, how the country is doing, how the economy is doing, how President Trump and the Republicans are viewed. These are very wild questions that are left up for grabs. But right now, based on the current generic ballot numbers, the Democrats are on track to win the House for, I believe, the first time since not that long ago, actually. I think they had it in 2020 and the Republicans won it back in 2022. So it hasn't been that long, but if the Democrats do this, they win back the House, they get 227 House seats, Republicans get 208. And this is why Republicans are having the conversation about redistricting in a lot of states, because they know the writing on the wall right now is based on the current House map. Republicans are probably not going to hold a majority if everything goes the way the current polling suggests that it will. So first we'll look at the state of Ohio, as this is one of the first states that was mentioned. Ohio, at very least, if Republicans redistrict, they're hoping to get more House seats out of the 1st district, out of the 9th and the 13th, flipping to the Republican side. The Republicans could try and gerrymander around Ohio 3 and Ohio 11 and get these areas, but I think they end up staying on the Democratic side. But either way, that gets the Democrats down 3 seats, 224. Republicans are at 211. So that cuts into the Democrats' margin a little bit. Now, Republicans and President Trump specifically have also made a note about the state of Florida. Florida, Ron DeSantis has teased potential redistricting as well and trying to get some seats out of Florida, maybe trying to net an extra 5 or so seats in Florida. The first targets I think Republicans would seek to eliminate are probably the 9th District in Florida 9 with Darren Soto, and definitely Jared Moskowitz's district in Florida 23. Now, those two would be probably the most likely Republican targets. Republicans could try and go after some of these more solid Democratic seats, but again, that would be probably very tough and may put some other Republicans potentially in danger of losing. But what if Republicans net 2 out of Florida just on that alone? Well, that gets the Republicans to 213, Democrats are at 222. Now we go to the state of Texas. Texas has been getting a lot of talk, and they've been really reigniting the conversations of redistricting. 2 Republican targets right away are Texas 34 with Vicente Gonzalez and Texas 28 with Henry Cuellar. Those are some seats the Republicans certainly want to target. Now, that's only 2 seats right there, but they do make a very significant impact. Republicans say they want to try and get an extra 5 House seats out of the state of Texas. It's going to be very tough to do, though, as the Dallas area is all pretty strong Democratic. The Houston area is also very strong Democratic as well. And Central Texas around Austin is also very Democratic. So Republicans could try and get those, but I feel like that's going to be very tough. You would need a really radical gerrymander in that regard to do that. But even if the Republicans do that, they get Ohio, Texas, and Florida at a very conservative estimate. That gets them closer, but Democrats still hold the majority at 220. Republicans are at 215. But the Republicans are also targeting, potentially, the state of Missouri, where the Democrats currently hold 2 House districts in the 5th and the 1st district. Maybe the Republicans try and redistrict and gerrymander these seats and get rid of these 2 Democratic wins. Well, if they could do that, that would get the Democrats at 218, Republicans at 217. So with very big redistricting in Missouri and pretty pretty considerable redistricting in Texas, Florida, and Ohio, that would get it within a 1-seat House majority for the Democrats based on the current generic ballot polling for 2026, which essentially means if the generic ballot ends up underestimating the Democrats or being lower for the Democrats than it is right now, the Republicans may be able to hold the House by 1 or 2 seats if the gerrymandering goes 100% their way. Now, that is a big if, because the Republicans aren't going to just redistrict all these maps, and the Democrats aren't just going to have anything to say about it. As I mentioned, California Governor Gavin Newsom has threatened to redistrict his map as well to try and stop the Republicans from doing it in Texas and in Ohio. Now, what could that look like? Well, immediately 2 districts come to mind that are very competitive, and the 22nd with David Valadao, and 41 with Ken Calvert, and another one, California 40, with Young Kim. If the Democrats redistrict here and they can draw out these seats, that would get California and the Democrats back up to 221 to the Republicans 214. Now, could Democrats try and radically redraw and get California's 3rd district as well? But just sticking with that right now, that would get the Democrats up another handful of seats. Democratic Governor Kathy Hochul in New York has also expressed interest in trying to redraw the map and gerrymander the map to combat the Republicans here. And New York could have some very considerable gains here. First one I'm watching is Mike Lawler's district in New York 17. That's already a top target for the Democrats. I'm sure Democrats would love to try and redistrict that one out. Maybe New York 1 with Nicholas LaLauda could potentially be a target as well. That one's a little bit more of a stretch than New York 17 is, but maybe Democrats are able to draw that one out as well. That would get Democrats up to 223, Republicans 212. And the state of Maryland, where there's only 1 Republican House seat in the 1st district, if the map is drawn in a certain way, it is possible Democrats could get that seat as well. So even if Republicans redistrict and gerrymander the maps in Texas, in Ohio, in Florida, and in Missouri, and that gets them within getting close to the majority, the Democrats, if they can get the legal process to play out, could come back and also gerrymander in California, in New York, and in I'm totally blanking. I'm sorry, California, New York, and Maryland. That could give the Democrats an extra few seats and essentially negate the changes made by the Republicans. So this is all a very fascinating conversation. We'll have to wait and see what actually happens. Ohio and Texas, I do believe, have laws in the books that do allow for a mid-decade redistrict, whereas California and New York, I don't believe do. The governors would have to call for a special section of the legislature to do that, and I'm not sure if the state Supreme Courts would step in and allow this or not allow this, but this is all a very big conversation happening in political circles, this topic of redistricting, and putting it bluntly, if you're not 100% like kept up with all the politics and elections, it probably seems like a very convoluted and confusing mess. And I've been trying to keep up with it as much as possible, and even I think it's kind of a bit of a confusing mess. So we'll have to wait and see how it all goes. As any news breaks on these maps and such, I will, of course, be doing videos and trying to keep you updated as much as possible. But there's real potential here that the redistricting process, if there is any, come 2026, to get really complicated and really messy. At the core fundamental levels of it, based on the 2024 U.S. House map, assuming nothing changes, and the current generic ballot numbers right now, I would say it's more likely than not the Democrats win back the House come 2026, keeping on track the way parties not in charge usually do in the midterm elections, especially factoring in it will be the midterm election in the president's 2nd term. Then usually the off-year party does very well, like Republicans did in 2014. In that midterm, like Democrats did in 2006, the off party usually does very well in the president's 2nd midterm. So from that standpoint alone, the Democrats should probably win back the House. Even if it's only by like 3 or 4 seats, the Democrats should have enough to win back the House. But if the Democrats don't gerrymander or redistrict their maps at all, and the Republicans are able to redistrict and gerrymander in Texas, Ohio, Florida, and maybe Missouri, the Republicans may have a very narrow path in doing that point where they'd be essentially changing around 10 to 15 House seats. They would then have a credible path to potentially holding on to the House majority. But again, if the Republicans did that, I don't think the Democrats would just let that happen without trying to redistrict their own maps to try and stop the Republicans from getting the majority that way. So it's all a convoluted mess. There's going to be a lot of legal questions and probably states and state parties suing each other over whether or not this is allowed, whether this is constitutional. And to be completely honest with you, I really don't know how this is all going to play out. which states can do it, which states can't, if any can do it or any can't. We'll have to wait and see how this all goes. It's going to be a very messy process. But as of today, I think the Democrats are more likely than not going to keep the House if no redistricting happens. If redistricting happens, everything's kind of out the window, and we have to wait and see how the new maps are redrawn, because that could have a very drastic impact on which party holds the House come 2026. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it informative. If you did, make sure to leave a comment below telling me what you think of this video and who you think is going to win the House come 2026 and what your thoughts are on the redistricting and how that could all go come 2026. Also, if you have anything I talked about in this video that you're confused on, you have any questions, you want more clarity from me, or if you have anything you want to add to anything I've said in this video, please feel free to leave it down below. I always check out the comments, so certainly I'll be reading everything you leave down there. Also, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit like and subscribe, as I post 3 new videos every day that you're not going to want to miss. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in a future video.